My name is Sheryl Matsuoka, the President and CEO of the Hawaiʻi Restaurant Association and the Hawaiʻi Restaurant Association Educational Foundation. Mahalo for joining me here today on the Hawaiʻi Restaurant Association podcast. And today we have a special guest all the way from the National Restaurant Association. He's been with the NRA for 16 years as the Vice President of Government Affairs. Today's discussion is a timely discussion. We will be focusing on what will carry over from 2024 and all the legislative challenges and opportunities of 2025. Any updates on tax policies and how this will affect restaurant owners, operators, and business leaders. Everyone should always be proactive by utilizing the National Restaurant Association's resources and continuously engage in all of the advocacy issues here in Hawaii and nationally. So I'm going to start by having my guests introduce themselves. Can I start off with Dan?
Absolutely. And Sheryl, thank you so much for having me on today. And it's great to be here with Victor, who served on our board for a number of years, and also with Andy. A little bit of background, as Sheryl mentioned, I've been at the association for a little over 16 years, but I've been a part of the DC community for about 25 years. I originally came out here from the state of Wisconsin and worked for a member of Congress for 8 years, and then spent 2 years in the George W. Bush administration before transitioning over to the Restaurant Association. I should add that I joined you today from my house, hence the blurred background, since we had 8 inches of snow last night, which pretty much paralyzes a city like Washington, D.C. So it's great to be here with you, and look forward to talking about really a lot of opportunities with a quick look back at 2024.
Thank you, Dan, for taking the time. Andy, could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Andy Huang, and I'm the current chair of the Hawaii Restaurant Association. I'm also the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for L&L Hawaiian Barbecue. It's very a privilege here to listen to all these upcoming issues and or potential issues. And as the business restaurant operator, we are always focusing on daily operation. And, a lot of times the operator didn't understand the importance to be involved and engage with the legislative society or the government relationship. A lot of the lawmakers are making rules, and a lot of times they don't really understand the business side of it. So, they come from good intention, but the consequences is usually it's affecting our business operators. So it's very good to be here, and just want to listen and hopefully learn something and we can share with our store owners.
Thank you, Andy. And now Victor Lim, who does not need any introduction, is our Hawaii Restaurant Association Government Relations Lead. Victor.
Hey, aloha, everybody. Good morning. And hey, it's a pleasure to be joining everybody on this podcast. As you know, I'm a McDonald's franchisee. That's supposedly my full-time job. But my part-time job is the legislative lead for Hawaii Restaurant Association, which actually takes more time than my full-time job in many cases. And today I have the pleasure of having Dan Roehl join us. Dan and I worked together when I served on the National Restaurant Association National Board for many, many years. So Dan, welcome and aloha.
Thank you so much, Victor. And I guess if I could, Sheryl, I just want to emphasize a little bit about what Victor and Andy just said about the value and the importance of engagement. There's a member of Congress who I'm a big fan of, and the term she likes to use is as a legislator, I'm a decision maker, not an expert. And the role that all of you and your members play, whether it's at the state level, the local level, or certainly here at the federal level, educating your members about how the industry works, how policies impact your ability to operate, to hire staff, to provide benefits to staff, and to just overall have a great hospitality experience is critical. I am not an operator. I'm a lobbyist. My parents are very proud of that, I would say. But that being said, it really is critical to what we do here in DC is having that reinforcement back home with legislators. It's really the most impactful thing someone can do. And what I would argue is if you care about your business, whether you like it or not, you are in business with the federal, state, and local government. So your engagement is critical to helping ensure we have policies that are going to be of net benefit to the industry.
Hey, Dan, like I said, thank you very much for joining us on this little podcast here in Hawaii. Today, the Congress just certified the election of President Trump and J.D. Vance as Vice President for the next term, 47th term of the presidency. So, from where we were the last 4 years, and now with the new administrations coming up in another 15 days or so, where do you see Congress is heading? Share with us your perspective. What are the pitfalls that we need to look forward to? And then we'll take this conversation from there. So the floor is yours, Dan.
Absolutely. Thank you, Victor. Yeah, so I think as we all probably know, you have a new Trump administration coming in on January 20th. He is now joined, and it's not a unique situation, but it still somewhat is in history to have a Republican Senate with a 53-seat majority, and then a Republican House, which ironically has about the same size majority, and in fact, due to some absences, may be operating on a 1 or 2 seat majority at any point in time. As a result, I think, as we've all seen, you should expect there's going to be a very aggressive approach from this Congress working with this president out of the gate to try and deliver on some of the promises they made. So let me kind of distill this down from a restaurant perspective somewhat, and maybe take it back to a little bit of last year, because there's a couple of these themes that are going to carry over, certainly in tax policy into 2025. But there's a few of them where we had some success, and I don't think we're going to see these topics come back. For example, last year we were able to defeat a really new regulation coming out of the Federal Trade Commission that would have prohibited us from attaching service charges to large restaurant meals or to certainly catering. Likewise, in the place of credit card fees, et cetera. I will say that we also made a lot of progress. The cost of swipe fees, which I'm sure most of you all are familiar with, is something that since 2019 gone up 34%. And we've been really working hard to inject competition into that marketplace. And it is a challenge when you work against well-funded and big banks and credit card companies. But we've seen progress made. And as you noted, Victor, J.D. Vance was just certified as the vice president, and he is one of our co-sponsors of this. So certainly opening up, I hope, as we start to look at 2025 here, some great opportunities. I'll also mention that we operate a law center, and that law center was very active last year in working with our partners in the business community, some important victories around joint employer standards, around blocking what we think is a too aggressive overtime standard that could be put into place. For those of you who operate with tipped employees, the 80-20-30 rule, which defines how much work in the non-tip space an employee can do and creates avenues for frivolous litigation. So I think there's a lot of great things from last year that we're building on, and there's going to be a ton of opportunity here for us to work with this new administration. And as I'll talk about, there's going to be some areas where we're going to hope to guide and direct them a little bit more than what we're seeing in some of the messaging. I would say as we head in to 2025, the biggest agenda item is going to be, can we extend what people call the Trump tax cuts, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2017. As you may know, a lot of the individual components of that legislation are set to expire at the end of this year. So what that would mean is you're going to have, from a restaurant perspective, for those of you who are pass-through entities, you're going to lose your 20% deduction for what's called 199 Cap A, because that's the section of the tax code it's under. You're losing some of your depreciation related expenses. We've already seen the amount you can write off in interest from EBITDA to EBIT, which really just narrows how much that you can write off to not get into too technical of a space. We're working on renewing and really improving the work opportunity tax credit to try to bring more people into the workforce. And then ultimately, as we've all seen, there's going to be a discussion about how do you handle no tax on tips, which I will admit in the restaurant industry is seen as an opportunity on one hand for attracting more employees into that part of the workforce. And I think, what we're hearing from members too is a little bit of a sense of concern that it's handled the right way so that it doesn't disincentivize employees from wanting to go into management or working in the back of the house. So what I think you're going to see happen, Victor, is Congress is going to work really aggressively out of the blocks here through a process, which I won't go into detail about, called reconciliation. And the only reason this process is important is it's because it only takes 50 votes in the US Senate to pass this legislation. So Republicans, with all of them on board in the House and at least 51 in the Senate, kind of have an avenue to do revenue-based policy. So I think tax policy will probably come through this space. And their number one goal is really to extend the expiring tax provisions and then work around the edges on a couple other pieces, probably in the area of no tax on tips. And I don't know if this is an issue, it probably is a little bit in Hawaii, is the state and local tax deduction cap. I think you'll see some effort to try and grow that so that you have more that you can deduct than the $10,000 cap that exists today and is also expiring. I would expect you to see us to be extraordinarily active in this space. It's something we started back last year. We've had a number of our members. This gets back to the engagement level that Andy, Sheryl, and Vic were talking about. We've had a number of our members who have testified officially before Congress on the importance of renewing these tax cuts, and we've had I think we had over almost 40 meetings with members directly by our Hill Runner program, which are our members who've agreed to kind of take a leading role with a member of Congress. And they did those over the summer. And again, talking about what does this mean from a restaurant standpoint? What does it mean to be able to have the money and the certainty to, maybe do that renovation or add to your patio, et cetera. So, great opportunities, but this is going to be a huge priority for the association, is ensuring that the components of tax reform that are our priorities are included in this package. And a lot of that is driving home that this is a Main Street business need, in which the industry has done a great job of, and I think we've helped frame the correct way. So there's no question that tax policy piece is going to be critical. We've seen, even in the last weekend, where House Republicans had a retreat talking about the need to try to get this done and get a bill on the president's desk by May. A lot of attention is paid to the first 100 days of Congress or an administration. And in this case, that's really going to be the effort, is to try and get everybody on board. It's going to take a lot of work from my experience. Only one or two members of the Republican conference in the House disagreeing creates a roadblock to it. And I think you're going to see Congress rely or ask a lot of us in the industries that care about this to make sure we're speaking up with a loud voice. So tax policy, Victor, absolutely a priority.
Yeah, but as you know, many restaurant owners are pass-through entities. So the ability of depreciation, write-offs on reinvestment, things like that are huge on our survival, because the reinvestment dollars continue to go up, and yet the ability to capture it with offset with tax revenue is so critical.
Well,
yeah, so it's like as the operator, we have been seeing our profit margin shrinking. So any of these help will definitely help us on the bottom line and the survival, like Victor said, the survival of the business. It's critical. Yeah, it's very critical. And just by listening Dan's a few minutes of speech, and I already wow, I mean overwhelming information, like. And that's why we want to support, Sheryl, Dan, Victor in this government relationship, government affair is so important as an operator. Like some of them I heard of it, but then didn't know like how much work you have to put in, and if some of those regulations gets passed, it's gonna be a painful for the restaurant owners. Yeah, it's thank you so much.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
no,
why it's so important that Dan, Victor does such a great job, and Victor has this long relationship with Dan that goes back years, right, Victor? And
Yeah.
it's so important, this relationship, which is why I really wanted to do this recording so that our members and our subscribers and our community can hear all the wonderful things that NRA is doing. So thank you, Dan.
absolutely. Indy, I think you hit on a really important piece here that's part of this message is, I'm just sitting here looking at the chart that we kind of keep track of this. And, since pre-COVID, so, February of 2019, labor costs up over 30% for hourly wages, food costs up over 30% for wholesale food prices. I mentioned the it's 2% increase in swipe fees, utilities up, supplies up, your insurance costs have to be up. You put all that into context, I'm not surprised to hear margins are tightening. We hear that from a lot of our members. And then you look at the possibility of, without congressional action, your tax situation becoming extraordinarily disadvantageous to you and working against you. It is not a great place to be in from an operator standpoint. And it's something we're conveying as best we can to Congress, and you all, and this again goes back to I feel like our theme here, which is engage, engage, engage. Operators telling that directly to members of Congress is the most impactful way for them to understand that without action, there's going to be consequences.
Hey, one of the scary part here in Hawaii the last 2 years is that almost every week we hear about some of the legacy restaurants going under because just the inflation and cost of doing business just does not allow the survival. And a lot of everything is energy based, right? I mean, the food supply chain, the farms, you name it. And so do you see this Trump about drill baby drill and to try and reduce the thing? How do you think that's gonna help us lower the inflation effect on the whole supply chain?
Yeah, no, when you look at, to go back at the data, what was one of the key issues and why President Trump prevailed in November? Inflation is at the top of that list. There's no question about it. The consumer, you guys see it in your business every day, is feeling particularly pinched. And to your point, Victor, I think there's a couple areas where Trump's going to really try to move as aggressively as he can in here. And one of them is in this, quote unquote, regulatory relief space. The other, I think, is in that energy space. So let's take energy first. I think the good news is I understand this, complex reconciliation process is that there are things he can do in that process to open up, additional energy production in the United States, whether it's, oil and gas drilling or other venues that it falls into that category of being a revenue generating piece because of the lease sales that go into it. So I do think you're going to see a more approachable effort to getting your arms around the cost of energy. And to your point, the ag sector is the most energy consuming sector that exists. Plus, it's obviously the cost of energy impacts our customers' ability to go and eat out. So absolutely critical that you have good energy policy from both our supply side and our demand side. On the regulatory front, I think you're going to see a very different approach, particularly on labor policy from this president than what we're coming out of. Lori Chavez DeRemer, who I know you are talking about a little earlier, who is a member of Congress from Oregon. So we know her very well from an engagement standpoint, has been nominated to be the new labor secretary. There's certainly been some concerns raised by aspects of the business community because her father was a Teamster, and she's got a great relationship with aspects of that labor community. But, at the same time, the Labor Department is going to be, President Trump's Labor Department. He's been pretty clear that he doesn't support the PRO Act and some of the provisions that are in there. But I think even more so, you're going to see an effort. It probably is going to combine with this DOGE effort by Elon Musk and Rudy Giuliani of like, how do we really try and get in here and reduce the regulations, reduce some of the challenges that businesses are facing. Some of them for us are going to be, clearly ones that are directly, right? You're not going to see a federal government coming out probably and saying, let's raise wages above a market-based number. You're not going to see them probably. I know you guys just defeated a scheduling, I think it was mandate. Like, you're not going to see that policy driven at you for the next 4 years from the federal government level. And I think you're going to see a labor department that's trying to work, not purely from a pro-business side, but one that's going to work not necessarily against business, looking for ways to help simplify, cut government, cut red tape, make it easier to do your job. And honestly, there's probably even more opportunity here in our supply chain and in other parts of it that could hopefully help take some of the pressure off of the cost increases that we're seeing. I would say along that vein, we are talking, our CEO, Michelle Korsmo, has talked with Lori. We've been talking with, I should say, Secretary nominee Chavez DeRemer. So I think we're feeling pretty comfortable, and we'll see how her hearing goes before the Senate, that she's going to be someone that we can work really closely with, and we'll have a very firm understanding, which is critical, again, to the restaurant industry. I will also add that I think you're going to see us play a role with the Trump administration on how do we get more people into the workforce. Are we looking at additional visa type programs, which might be a little heavier lift for this administration, but how are we encouraging apprenticeships? How are we encouraging education in a way that brings people into and working in the industry? I mean, we're the #2 private sector employer. We're a third of people's first jobs. We've done a lot, which was partly a partnership with the Trump administration on second chance opportunities. How are we working to get these folks into the workforce? And I think we're also going to have and prepared to have some conversations about what does immigration reform look like moving forward. If we're talking about deporting criminals and having tighter border security, that's I think a conversation that we're pretty comfortable having. If we're starting to look at the solution being raiding businesses, including restaurants, I think you're going to see us expressing some concerns that that's maybe the most constructive approach to this. And there's clearly categories of folks in the U.S. That we need to find solutions for, including dreamers, many of which actually work in the restaurant industry. And to the point we're talking about on cost, there's definitely a point you can reach where you're driving up labor costs artificially just because of what's happening in that sector. And I think you're going to see us working closely with Congress and the administration on these pieces to try to mitigate unintended consequences. But what we would love to see nothing more than is let's create some longer term policies that create some stability for the industry and can allow you guys to make good business investments with a sense of what you're going to be facing and dealing with. I'll add one more piece to this quickly, which is trade is kind of the same conversation that we're having on this, and it's I think particularly impactful for Hawaii. And ironically, I think you're the only state. The example I would use is coffee, which is, many of you know, the price of coffee is at a record high right now. And I want to say Hawaii is the only state in the U.S. where you probably can grow coffee. I mean, this is an example where if you're putting up tariffs on coffee, you're not onshoring growing coffee. And the last thing you probably want is everybody who wakes up in the morning and has a cup of coffee to be complaining about the cost increase they're facing as a result of a 20% tariff on coffee. And you're starting to see some of this. There's an article here this morning too about how the president's looking to be more strategic on some of these pieces, and I think you'll see him use his tariff power selectively. At least that's my thought process. China will be its own unique situation, but are there situations where other countries have higher tariffs on our products than we have on theirs? I think he'll look to balance that out. I think you're going to look if there's legitimately supply chain pieces that are national security or that we want to onshore and can be onshored. That will be part of that conversation. But for us, critically, there's a lot of food that's imported into the United States, and the last thing we want to do is create a situation where we're artificially driving up those costs.
Hey, Dan, what you said about the Labor Secretary nominee really, I think, put some concerns at ease for me personally. And at the end of the day, I think she's going to be carrying out Trump policy. And if Trump is not against, the what do you call that? PRO-Act, I mean, that's the big concern for us. The other thing was really, knowing that Congress is not going to be coming out with many labor initiative, which means we're more concerned about what's going to happen in a blue state like Hawaii. So I think it's more so, as you know, many of these initiative and bills are coming out at the state level. And more so, I think, like what Andy said, Sheryl, is that, this might be a very interesting state legislature next week when it opens, because, we are as blue as you can get. And so you can never expect or predict what's going to be introduced. So more so that, we as a business community and restaurant industry rally up and pay attention to what's happening here locally from HRA,
Yeah. So and like being, so I mean, I've been with L&L for about 3 years, and then we have 230 location nationwide. Before I joined the company, I was only working locally in a management role, several different management role, and I didn't really get involved with the government affair or legislators and stuff, all these policies, because we're just working and trying to make money. And back in the days, the policy were not too aggressive, so it was doing good. And then this past 3 years after the COVID started to change, and a lot of policy all of a sudden start popping up. And I understand these initiatives are good intention. So, but the thing is, once I started to get understanding about policies on in the mainland, the continent, and California's, and I started to realize some of the policy on the mainland affects the Hawaii's policy, right? And then so it's really important to kind of keep up with the new rules, and because it does affect locally here. And we're so grateful that we have Victor and Dan advocate for the industry, but we also call on all the members, all the restaurateurs, to be more involved in order for us to kind of prevent some of the policy, or maybe give some feedback so that the policy, we know the intention, so we can have tiers, right? We can go in tiers, or we can also have alternative, like when they start the plastic ban, there's no alternative, the cost of bags and packaging just skyrocketed, especially the takeout food containers. When they imposed that policy, no styrofoam, the cost went up quadruple. It's not even 10%, 20%, it's quadruple the cost. So it's really hurting our business. But we want the environment to be better, so we want to move toward that, but we need to have good alternative before the policy start getting in place. So
And
Yeah,
and
that's-
it's a big teamwork. I mean, you know, myself representing HRA, and I need all the fellow operators, business people out there to, you know, when you meet your legislators at your restaurants, you know, your council member at the restaurants, I need everybody to engage them because it's a you know, divide and conquer, you know, or, you know, it takes all of us working together, speaking on the same voice to do that. So whether it's at, you know, at the beginning of this podcast, what Dan said, you know, whether it's nationally, locally at the state level or at the city council level, because all three levels can impact our business in a big way. So, you know, what can I say? We're so fortunate today that we have Dan from the national perspective representing HRA representing NRA, National Restaurant Association, for the last 15 plus years. And I partner with him nationally. And so, you know, I'm glad that he's partnering with us here locally this go around. So,
Thank
Well,
you.
it's great to have all of you as partners. I should probably mention for folks who are listening to this in case they're unaware, you know, being a member of the Hawaii Restaurant Association also gives you a membership in the National Restaurant Association. So you're all our members, and you should certainly feel free at Restaurants Act. You can look up or restaurant.org. We've got a lot of information, ways to further engage. I'll further plug for anyone who wants to make a long trip to the East Coast, like I just did on Friday. We have our public affairs fly-in where we go meet with members of Congress coming up April, I want to say 2nd and 3rd, and we certainly would obviously welcome anyone in DC to be a part of that.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen. So let's wind down this show. Let's do the final remarks. Can I please start off with Andy? Any final remarks?
No, I think you know, it's great to listen to all these policy changes and to keep up with the current trend and understand how everything goes. And just appreciate Dan and Victor and Sheryl for the advocating for the restaurant business, especially in Hawaii too. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Dan, do you have any closing remarks?
I'm at risk of, you know, beating a dead horse here, but engage is really my closing remarks. Don't expect someone else is just going to do it for you. Members of Congress really want to hear from constituents, but in particular, ones who are operating businesses in their, you know, in their districts. So please take the time and engage.
Thank you. Victor, closing remarks.
And the same is true locally, whether you're a state legislator or city council people at different islands, you know, we need to engage, because if you're not engaging, you're going to be part of the menu. So you don't want to be part of the menu. So, you know, the legislative session starts next week. So, I mean, we're looking for a very robust activity. We're not sure exactly what's going to be introduced. We have a lot of rookies out there. So many of them, they mean well, they try a lot of things. And then I think we got to share our experience and our perspective to make sure that, you know, we all march correctly to make Hawaii a better place. So thank you very much for joining this podcast.
Thank you, Dan. So in closing, just to wrap it up, you know, Hawaii Restaurant Association members and subscribers, you're really encouraged to visit the National Restaurant Association website. There's comprehensive resources. There's a lot of updated information. I send out a lot, including surveys. There's another survey coming out. And as Dan and I were talking about it, you know, through the surveys is how they collect the stats of what's going on in the Hawaii restaurants. So it's so critical that you fill out also the surveys. And that's a great way for us to get a true snapshot of what is happening here in Hawaii. So in closing, again, my name is Sheryl Matsuoka, the president and CEO of the Hawaii Restaurant Association and the Hawaii Restaurant Association Educational Foundation. The Hawaii Restaurant Association is the organization unifying, representing, and supporting the Hawaii restaurant and food service industry. Please remember to nourish connections, savor life, eat well, and live well. Until the next show, we'll see you then.